हेलो एवरीवन, वेलकम टू माय चैनल। आज हम करेंगे MEG 7 में ब्लॉक 6-7 है पोइट्री का, और उसमें यूनिट 4 है निज़म एज़ेकियल एंड कमला दास। तो निज़म एज़ेकियल तो हम कर चुके हैं, अब आज हम कमला दास उनके बारे में थोड़ा पढ़ेंगे। Kamala Das was born in Kerala in 1934. Her mother, Balamani Amma, is a well-known poet and writer in Malayalam. Kamala spent several years in Calcutta, where she went to Catholic schools. She also went some years in boarding school. She was married fairly early before she finished her college, so she happens to be perhaps the only leading Indian English poet without a degree to her name. She began writing early and published her first poem in the Indian PEN. She was also published by C.R. Mendy in the Illustrated Weekly of India. Her collections include Summer in Calcutta, The Descendants, and The Old Playhouse, and other poems. The first volume of her collected poems, published in 1984, won her the Sahitya Academy Award for in 1985. Besides poetry, she also writes short stories, some of which were collected in the Doll for the Child Prostitute, and other stories and novels. There are two of the later, Manas and Alphabet of Lust. Her controversial autobiography My Story is published in 1974. अब उनकी जो थोड़ी पोइट्री की बात कर लेते हैं. कमला दास हैज़ बीन टाइपकास्ट एज अ कन्फेशनल पोइट, जैसे सिल्विया प्लेथ थी ना, वैसे ही. There is no doubt about her poems are accounts of deeply personal experiences. But more than that, this professional element, it is the brutal frankness of her verse that shocked and attracted readers. Kamala writes about sexual frustration and desire, of the suffocation of an arranged loveless marriage, of numerous affairs, of the futility of lust, of the shame and sorrow of not finding love after repeated attempts, of the loneliness and neurosis that stalks women especially. As such, her poetry speaks not only of her personal distress but of her outrage, उनका जो गुस्सा है, against the social norms of a patriarchal society. Kamala was featured in Time magazine for breaking the sexual barriers. What she did was to bring new subject matter into Indian English poetry. A whole range of experiences which were never spoken of were introduced for the first time by her. As Bruce King says, Bruce King बोलते हैं, rather than finding salvation in art, Kamala Das poetry spoke of fantasies, many lovers, and continuing disappointments of love. Now, equally important is Kamala's experimentation with language, as we shall see in an introduction. An introduction जो उनकी पोएम है ना, उसमें उन्होंने काफ़ी कुछ बोला है इंग्लिश के बारे में, कि इंग्लिश में लिखा है तो लोग उनको बोलते हैं इंग्लिश में क्यों लिख रहे हो, तो उन्होंने फिर एक्सप्लेनेशन दी है काफ़ी ज़्यादा. और उन्होंने ये भी बोला कि मुझे ना रोका जाए, जिस भाषा में मैं लिखना चाहती हूँ मुझे लिखने दिया जाए. Okay, she began to use Indian English not in the ironic and comic manner in which Ezekiel did, but naturally, unaffectedly. Not being a foreign returned English teacher, she had no qualms about using a language. अभी काम्स क्या होता है? काम्स होता है फीलिंग ऑफ डाउट, स्पेशली अबाउट वेदर वन इज़ डूइंग और हैज़ डन राइट. तो काम्स क्या है? फीलिंग ऑफ डाउट है. तो मैं इसको फिर से पढ़ती हूँ. नॉट बीइंग अ फॉरेन रिटर्न्ड इंग्लिश टीचर, शी हैड नो काम्स, शी हैड नो डाउट, शी हैड नो डाउट्स अबाउट यूजिंग अ लैंग्वेज विच शी वॉज कम्फर्टेबल एंड फेमिलियर विद. अगेन एज किंग ऑब्जर्व्स, किंग जो है, हमने पहले भी बोला है, किंग जो है वो बोलते हैं, मोर इम्पॉर्टेंट देन इट्स थीम्स वॉज द यूज ऑफ एन इंडियन इंग्लिश विदाउट द कंसर्न फॉर करेक्टनेस and precision, which characterized most earlier modern verse. Instead, a direct expression of feelings as it shifted through unpredictable emotions, creation its own form through its repetition of phrases, symbols, and reference. ओके, नाउ हम ना इसका, ये तो इनकी पोइट्री के बारे में हमने पढ़ लिया। इसमें ना हम इन दोनों जो हमने दोनों राइटर्स पढ़े उनके बारे में थोड़ा सा अभी हम लास्ट में कंक्लूजन पढ़ेंगे, ठीक है। We have seen now how Nizam Ezekiel is probably the most influential of the group of poets, editors, anthologists and teachers who form a literary avant-garde of modernism in, मतलब स्टार्टिंग की थी उन्होंने मॉडर्निज्म की इंडिया में इन 1950s and 60. He is modernist in his use of language, whole new range of new themes including problems of alienation and identity, sexuality and male female relationship. Ezekiel poetry also displays the introspective, ironic, humorous, explorative strains. Nizam also singles out for using Indian English for poetic effect. Okay. Now हम कमला दास उनके बारे में बात करते हैं. कमला दास poem work at least at two levels. Okay, on the one hand they depict a personal, a very individual tragedy. This tragedy may have variations but it is made up of the following ingredients, जैसे कि a bad marriage, a series of sexual flings, a collapse of personality, a sense of worthlessness at the end. But in addition to this personal tragedy, the poems also comment on larger topics, on the institution of marriage, on marital rape, marital neglect, marital jealousy, on extra marital sexual forays होता है attacks, and their unseemingly consequences, results on experiences and knowledge, hard won एंड बट फ्रेजाइल, बहुत मुश्किल से जो नॉलेज मिलती है बट फ्रेजाइल है, एकदम से ख़त्म हो जाती है, टूट जाती है. इफ़ वी कीप इन माइंड द फेमिनिस्ट स्लोगन द पर्सनल इज़ द पॉलिटिकल, देन दास पोएम आर नॉट अबाउट द प्राइवेट लाइफ ऑफ एन अनबैलेंस्ड वुमेन but about all those forces of tradition, culture and society which makes her so. These poems are an attack on a whole way of life characterized by patriarchal norms which oppress and restrict women, reducing them to neurotic and pathetic creatures. The poems are also ultimately about struggle and survival. Now, we begin this section by noticing how Das, जो क्या नाम था, कमला दास attempts to distance herself from politics. By doing so, what she is really signalizing is the inauguration of a different kind of politics, not a retreat into apolitical passivity. Thus, politics is not about the pursuit of power at the level of the state, but it is about personal empowerment. Politics की बात है कि personal empowerment की बात की गई है, autonomy and autonomy. It is about the politics of the integrity of the female self in male-dominated and sexually predatory world. It is the politics of the survival, not of the fittest, but मतलब जो फिट है ना वही सर्वाइव करता है, वो ये वाला पॉलिटिक्स नहीं है. बट इवन ऑफ दोज हु आर अनेबल टू फिट इन, दोज हु आर अनफिट एंड मिसफिट इन आवर सोसाइटी, मीन्स वुमेन की बात हो रही है ये. चलो, थैंक यू सो मच. यहाँ आज हमारा ये यूनिट फिनिश हो जाता है. थैंक यू. प्लीज़ सब्सक्राइब माई चैनल.